We are here live with you for Ask Me Anything with the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. My name is Kristin Roth. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions here at the Tuck School.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Butler. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions here at Tuck.
We're excited, and our goal today is to share with you tips for your round 2 and round 3 applications to make them the very strongest applications you possibly can. And of course, we want to get to your questions because it is Ask Me Anything. So definitely put your questions in the comments section and we will get to them. And Stephanie is going to kick us off. Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just start by saying that you will probably hear Kristin and I refer throughout our conversation to our 4 criteria, our admissions criteria, which are SMART, NICE, accomplished, and aware. I would also encourage you to go to our website where those 4 criteria are detailed pretty thoroughly. That will give you a great idea of what we are looking at when we evaluate your applications. But we're going to try to keep it relatively tactical and to help you sort of move forward with that application in the next couple of months. I'll start with everyone's favorite area, which is, right, let's get that out of the way, the GMAT or the GRE. So this is one of the areas that we will look to for you to demonstrate the SMART criteria. So the GMAT or the GRE, along with your previous academic experience, will help us better understand your ability to handle what is a very rigorous MBA curriculum. Regarding whether you decide to take the GMAT or the GRE, so Tuck is excited to accept both. We have no preference one over the other. If you're still deciding which one you are going to take and submit, I would suggest taking a couple practice tests of each exam and determining which better demonstrates your abilities. If you are not satisfied with your scores in either exam, you might consider retaking them. I think not only does this help you better demonstrate your abilities, particularly if you're scoring higher in a practice test, but it also demonstrates your awareness that you perhaps understand that your score is not quite as competitive for Tuck, and also, some persistence as well. So if you have the ability and the resources, you might consider retaking. The grade point average, so that is kind of the quantitative metric that we look at as far as your previous academic experience, but we do not evaluate this in isolation. So in addition to the number itself, we're also looking at the types of courses that you were taking, how rigorous they were, what other, the course load that you had, what other demands you might have had on your time. Perhaps you were, you worked through school, or you were heavily involved in extracurriculars, or had, participated in a really intense varsity sport, or whatever it was that might have given you a well-rounded college experience, but perhaps not the opportunity to showcase your best GPA. If you come from a less quantitative background, which is important for an MBA program, the quantitative skill set, or if you did not do as well as you would have liked to in college, you might consider taking some courses to help complement that and supplement it so the committee understands your true abilities. So some courses that you might consider, financial accounting, statistics, microeconomics, finance, or anything that helps you develop Excel skills. So moving on to full-time work experience, that of course will help us understand your accomplishment in part, and there are other areas that will help do this as well. But we see your work experience reflected in the resume, the letters of recommendation, and the interview as well. So this will help us understand sort of the nature of your work. This should be your goal, to help us understand the scope of your work, the level of your responsibility, how you've progressed through your career. Also keeping in mind that one industry sector has no more value than another. So someone coming from investment banking can offer, or someone coming from the nonprofit world is going to offer, can offer just as much as someone coming from investment banking. It really is about the value you've added to the organization, your growth, recognizing your strengths and abilities within those roles. Have you taken initiative? And then, the influence that you've had on the organization as well. So a lot more about how than specifically what. Also, leadership, of course, is important. The MBA degree is intended to develop leaders. And so part of what we look for is that leadership. Do recognize that as an admissions committee, we don't necessarily need to see this coming from a supervisory role over people. Some will come in having had that opportunity to manage people. Others will come in with the opportunity to have managed a team or a certain project or taken a role in a more indirect way. However you demonstrate leadership, and that could come also from an extracurricular activity as well. So lots of ways to do that. It doesn't have to be sort of a traditional supervisor role. And finally, your letters of recommendation. So again, these are going to talk about SMART. They are going to hit on accomplishment, but they are also going to touch on nice and aware. The questions that we're asking your recommenders are available on the website, so you are welcome to take a look to see what we'll be asking your recommenders. This is really valuable to us for many reasons, but in part because it's the only or one of the only areas that doesn't come directly from the applicant. So recommendation letters allow us to see your current accomplishments, your previous accomplishments, how well you've done in your career thus far. They also help us understand growth areas and opportunities for potential. I'll talk a little bit about who you might select for your letters of recommendation. Typically, the best choice is your current direct supervisor, if possible. Ultimately, it's most important that you choose someone who knows you well and can speak in detail and offer examples regarding your work and your interactions with the team. So if that person, if the current direct supervisor is perhaps not an option, you think it's going to limit opportunities for advancement over the next year, perhaps salary opportunities, that's okay. Other options include previous direct supervisors, perhaps a client, someone who managed a team or a project that you were working on. So there are options outside of that current direct supervisor. Those also make great second recommenders as well. We do ask for 2. If you do not get a letter from your direct supervisor, I would encourage you to just write a brief explanation in the optional essay that we provide. Kristin will talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But do let us know exactly why you didn't request your current direct supervisor to provide that recommendation. That way we don't get creative and come up with some other reason that might reflect poorly on your relationship with them. I would also encourage you to meet with your recommenders once you've selected them. It's a great idea to meet, and talk about this sort of verbally, particularly, or especially if you are able to do it face-to-face. I'd encourage you not to do it via email or other written forms, but do talk to them and remind them of some of your recent accomplishments. Share with them why you are excited about pursuing the MBA, what your goals are for the future, and maybe a little bit about the schools that you're targeting as well and why. Also, remind them that generalizations typically aren't as helpful to the admissions committee. If they can back those up with specific examples, it's a lot more compelling and will certainly work in your favor there. So the reason I recommend not to do that via writing, sometimes it can be a little bit too easy for a quick copy and paste at the last minute. So don't even tempt them with that option. Do it verbally. Plus, it's nice. It's a great way to sort of further develop that relationship. Give them plenty of time to meet the deadline. Make sure they know exactly when that is and they have lots of time. and then thank them profusely. They spent a lot of time hopefully working on these, and you should be grateful. So that's where I will stop for now.
All right.
Hand the baton to Kristin.
Terrific, thank you. I get to talk to you about essays and the interview. So those are the two places where we really get an opportunity to hear your story. And this is your chance to articulate who you are and what you bring. We will see all four of the criteria in different ways in both of those sections. If you look at our essay questions, and I'm not going to go through the essay specifically, but if you look at our essay questions online, you'll see that the first one really will hit the aware criteria, where we're going to learn a little bit more about you. And the second one really hits our nice criteria. If you want more information about those and actually see what the Executive Director of Admissions and Financial Aid, Luke Pena, says about what he's looking for in those essays, you should go to our Tuck 360 blog, which you can see on our website. And in the middle of August, there is a blog post from Luke about the long answer essays. And in the middle of September, there is one about the short answers. So I encourage you to read those to be really prepared when you draft and finalize your essays. But let's get started on learning more about you through your essay. So as I said, this is our chance to get to know more about you. And that means it's important for you to be yourself. Don't try and have a voice in the essay that is not your real voice, that is not authentically you. It is your opportunity to tell us about yourself, and if you're trying to be somebody else because you think that's what we want, it's not going to give us that information. Be clear and concise too, because there are word limits to the essays, and we need to know certain things, but we also have more of the application to go through, and it's a competitive process. You want to exercise some editorial judgment on how to best tell your story and how to answer our questions. And that gets to the point of be sure to answer our questions. Sometimes it's tempting to answer the thing or give the story that you want to give as opposed to a direct answer to our question, because it's not getting to the things you really want to highlight. We ask our questions for a reason, so be sure to actually answer the question asked. Also, be sure you're not taking an essay that you've already written and just tweaking it to try and make it fit. It may not be quite the perfect fit, and it will not show out your best foot forward in the application process. In order to make sure that 1, you're being yourself, 2, you're being clear and concise, and 3, you are directly answering our questions, I have a couple tips for you. First thing is give your essays to someone to read who knows you well. That person can read for your voice. Does it sound like you, or does it sound like you're trying to be different than who you are? So somebody who knows you well can read for that. But then give your essays to someone to read who doesn't know you well. They'll be playing more of the role of the admissions committee. We don't know you well, so your essays need to make sense. They can point out any gaps or any problems in the logic or things maybe you over-explain. All those things would be valuable. Another tip is to give your essays to someone to read without giving them the questions you were asked to answer. And if they can deduce or get at least the gist of the questions from your essay, you've got a good sense that your essays are on target. If they can't, you might want to go back and say, what didn't I do here? One of the things I'm going to highlight, and Stephanie mentioned this, the optional essay, it is truly optional. We give you an opportunity basically to fill in things that are important for us to know that you didn't have an opportunity to explain elsewhere in the application. So be sure that you're only using it if you feel you need to. Some things that you might do, well, Stephanie mentioned if you have a recommender choice that might be unusual. You don't feel like you can ask your current recommender, or you haven't worked with them, or your current supervisor, you haven't worked with them very long. You want to highlight a different side of yourself, and so you might pick a community involvement activity that you've been really involved in, someone who knows you well. Remember Stephanie's guidelines on that. Just explain that to us. You could also explain things that might be anomalies, like a grade that wasn't quite as positive as you would have liked. We're going to see it on your transcript, so if you want to address that, that's a great thing to do. You might address a job gap or a gap in your educational experience. Again, we're going to see that, so it's best to address it and be upfront with it so we don't get creative, because we do like to make sure we fill in those gaps. The other thing I'll say is this does not need to be an essay. It can be, I call it optional stuff. It can be a couple sentences. It can be a bullet points. It does not need to be a full essay with a starting paragraph and a body and the ending paragraph. Just tell us the basic information that you need to share. The other thing I'm going to recommend strongly is that you proofread. Not because one typo is going to sink your application, it's not, but you also want to always put your best foot forward. So if we see a pattern of typos throughout your application, we're going to just wonder how careful you're being in putting that best foot forward. And it is a competitive process, so you absolutely want to submit your very strongest application. Okay, so let's turn to the interview now. As I said, this is another opportunity for us to get to know you, so it's really important that you be yourself and that you know your story well. So think about why you're applying. Do that self-reflection. It's going to be something that you want to do for the entire process. But in the interview, you need to be ready to answer questions about yourself. And that means you need to prepare. You need to practice. Don't over-practice so you sound rehearsed. But it is important that you get used to talking about yourself and also recognize that you can't go on forever. So it's important to be clear and concise again. And to answer the question again. A lot of the tips that go with the essay also go with the interview. Another thing to recognize is that every school has a different interview policy. Be sure to understand the interview policy of the school that you're going to. Here at Tuck, you can do applicant-initiated interviews, and you may be invited to interview if you can't do an applicant-initiated interview. One thing I want to clarify is, though, if you want to do an applicant-initiated interview, there's a deadline for each round by which you must complete those. And you must come to the Hanover and the Tuck campus to do those. We don't do applicant-initiated interviews virtually or when we travel. So it's important that you come here. It's a great opportunity to really see the warmth and the community that we have here and to really experience the program firsthand. And that's one of the reasons we love to see people here. So I encourage you, if you can come and do an applicant-initiated interview, to do that. If for some reason you can't do an applicant-initiated interview, you can submit your application without the interview. It is not required to apply. And then we'll see if we feel that we need more information and we want to invite you to interview. One thing I should also mention, though, is that no one is admitted without an interview. So I want to be fully transparent about that so people understand. So either you need to complete the applicant-initiated interview or you will need to have been invited. So again, there are great tips on our blog post, our blogs about interviewing. I encourage you to take a look at them. Got a ton of information on the blog in general about Tuck, and if you haven't checked it out, you should. And I think we'll leave it there and turn it over to your questions. So we have our Eric and Sarah who are going to help us out with your questions.
Sure. So one we have here is someone who's interested in applying, but in 2019, so next year, and they're curious, how early should they start the process of taking the tests and all and that stuff that you mentioned?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
So taking the test specifically, I'll address first. And first of all, I think it's wonderful that you are thinking ahead so much. I think it will, inevitably make your application stronger in the end. So kudos to you. Regarding the test, I think it's a really great thing. You have an opportunity of time, and so starting now, I think, would be really advantageous. At least sort of understanding the practice test and studying. These are tests that you can study for. So there's a lot of helpful resources on MBA.com, which is associated with the GMAT test, and so kind of the inside scoop there to help you get started. One, not only does it give you time to study, but it also gives you an opportunity to retake the test as well if you don't score as well as you'd like to. Some other things to think about right now, specifically, you could think about people who might provide good recommendation letters. You could continue to cultivate that relationship over the next several months. Will likely make that letter stronger. Also, thinking about, sort of more generally speaking, really reflecting and understanding what it is, what are the reasons that you are deciding to take 2 years out of the workforce and pursue your MBA. That will, as you continue to refine that through a lot of introspection, it will ultimately make your applications better and also set you up for a better MBA experience because that career exploration will happen pretty quickly. While you're doing that, get to know schools that you might be targeting. I'm glad to see that you are interested in Tuck, and hopefully that continues to be the case, but talk to our students, talk to our alums, learn both what drew them to Tuck, but also maybe about their careers, if that's something that you're interested in. What's it like to work in that industry? Talk to other programs as well. Get a feel for not only sort of what that program is about structurally and culturally, but also who are the people that you want to be working with on teams? Who do you want to be managed by or managing? Who do you want to have a cup of coffee with or live next door to? So those are some things that you will set you up for greater success in a year.
And the one thing I'll say is it's also great, as Stephanie said, you get to know the schools. You can start looking now to see when Tuck will be in your area if you want to meet us in person. We have on our events page on our website lots of opportunities right now to get in touch with students, and they're about to go on their break in December, and they will be traveling, and they are hosting coffees. I don't know, how many coffees do we have right now? Do you know?
At least 20.
At least 20?
27, I think I reported out, plus. So adding more every
day. And
day.
around the world, right?
Around the world, across the U.S. and internationally. So yeah, great point, Kristin. That's a face-to-face opportunity to ask some questions to a current Tuck student or an alum. We have a couple alums lined up as well.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Next question.
So we have a few questions about work experience. How much work experience do you think is required or needed or looked for in an applicant?
Another great question. So if you look at our class profile, you'll see that the average amount of work experience a student has is about 5, but that's not a requirement. That's just the average. Some students have far more and some students have less. It's not a question of how many years you have and that there's a requirement. It's more that you are ready for the MBA and you understand now is the right time in your career path. Either you're coming to a natural transition or you're looking to pivot careers. And it's important that you think about that and be reflective about why this is the right time. It's a great thing to think about. You may be asked about it in an interview. But some people are ready for an MBA after 10 years of experience, and some people aren't. Some people are ready after 2. It is not a requirement that you have to have X amount. What I will say, though, is that our curriculum is such that it's really helpful to have some work experience. So when you're sitting in a classroom, 1, you have something to contribute to class discussion, which is really critical in the Tuck classroom. But 2, you also have a way of understanding what your classmates are talking about, what the faculty member is talking about, and you have something to fall back on when you're thinking about, oh yeah, I did that, and I remember wondering how to handle that better or how this works. And now I have an example or a framework upon which to hang that information. So the work experience is important, but there's not one industry that's required, and there's not a certain amount of time.
One question we had, someone was curious about how specific their post-MBA goals should be. So after they've earned their MBA from Tuck, so what should they come to the school kind of hoping to do once they graduate and move on?
Yeah. Yes. So part of this just requires your judgment. I'd say to Eric, he specifically framed this question as post-MBA, and that's the first step I would encourage you to take, is that your short-term goal should not be so short-term that it involves what you hope to accomplish at Tuck specifically. So what do you want to do right after graduation? And then 10 years down the road or so, maybe that's the long-term goal. Short-term, it should be a little bit more specific than long-term. Long-term, and again, Kristin mentioned Luke's blog post on short answer questions. Take a look at those. But the long-term can be a little loftier, a little more, kind of the hopes and dreams that you have for yourself one day. So I would think, you don't have to sort of pinpoint the exact company and the exact role, definitely not, but, I would think about the industry that you're interested in, maybe have some ideas of companies that align with what you're considering, for a couple of reasons. One, this lets us know that you've done that introspection and that you understand what the MBA is about and how that can sort of catapult you to this career. And also it helps you, it sets you up for a better Tuck MBA experience, because you will hit the ground running. And the more you know about what you do want and don't want. And again, you should explore, you can explore. That's part of this MBA. We would never sort of force you to sort of stay, on the path toward this one goal. You will be exposed to new things and you should be open to that. But you will spread yourself far too thin and ultimately do yourself a disservice if you don't come in with some guidelines for yourself.
We had a few people who were wondering if you could, maybe if they missed it at the top, but if you could clarify the 4 criteria again. And then one person in particular was wondering if you could elaborate on the NICE criterion and specifically how can they convey that? Why is it something that we are explicitly evaluating?
Okay, so the criteria, one thing I should emphasize is our criteria, who we're looking for hasn't changed. How we're describing it is just a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more down to the bare bones. But it is very important that you go on our website and look at how we describe each criteria. But so let's talk a little bit about it. And Stephanie was very helpful and printed out, and I might have to refer to it a little bit just to make sure I'm giving you the full picture of what we're looking for. So SMART, well, kind of obvious. We need to know that you are A, going to be able to handle the rigor of the classroom, but also B, contribute to the community learning. And that means you need to be able to be academically successful, and also you need to be curious, willing to be challenged and to challenge others. And we'll get to NICE in a minute where we talk about challenging respectfully, but that you bring all of that to the classroom, because the reality is you're going to learn as much from the person next to you as you are from the faculty member in front of you. And so you need to be bringing everything you've got. You need to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. You need to show us that you've accomplished and achieved things because you did step outside of your comfort zone, or maybe you failed, but you were still willing to try and learn something from it. You didn't take the safe path every time and never stretch yourself. So SMART gets to curiosity. It gets to also the confident humility to know that you don't know everything. One of the things we talk about with wise leadership is wise leaders show confident humility, empathy, and judgment. And confident humility really comes in here, where you recognize you're not always going to be the smartest person in the room, but sometimes you will be, and you need to add that voice in the classroom. So that's SMART. NICE. So that was the most controversial criteria when we started talking about criteria, not because NICE should be controversial. Yeah, NICE shouldn't be controversial, but it does come with some connotations. And what you should understand is NICE doesn't mean that you smile at everybody or open doors for people and that's it. It means that it's an active word. In my mind, it's really an action word. You are actively NICE. You are actively invested in others, supporting others, engaging others, and working together towards success. Doesn't mean you're sacrificing yourself. It should be something that is mutually beneficial and everybody is moving forward. You invest in others generously. That's really what we talk about. It does mean that you have a habit of kindness and show empathy and compassion for others. And you can show that in a lot of different ways. So I know the question was specifically, how can you really demonstrate that one? Well, one, ideally you have multiple examples in your past, both large and small, where you can highlight those things. If you're just starting to cultivate your NICE quality right now, it might be time to think about that a little bit more. What I will also say is that we're not looking again for small acts of, I smile at people, I open the door, but I invest in somebody. So I am looking for the opportunity to help someone else's success, not when it's just easy for me, but when I have to really put myself into it. It does not mean that you're deferential. It does not mean that you do not challenge, but it means you challenge respectfully and civilly. Because in the classroom, we want to have vigorous conversation, but we also want to have conversation that is that contributes and doesn't detract from others' learning. So I think that's important there. Tuck students are accomplished. So accomplished, that's kind of obvious in some ways, but one of the things I do want to highlight is that people will accomplish in different ways. And we're going to look for what's been your legacy, what's been your impact in past roles, in your current role, what's different because you were there, how have you grown, how have you achieved, and then how are you going to bring that to Tuck as well? We're going to look, have you taken chances, have you taken risks, have you exercised good judgment in those risks, and have they led to something? are you able to learn from failure? And that kind of goes into awareness too. One of the things I think about with all of these criteria is there's a lot of overlap. But it's important to think about, have you learned from failure and then learn to use that to build success. Finally, Tuck students are aware. So we've talked about understanding yourself through the application process. I talked about it specifically with the interviews and the essays, but it's important that you understand who you are and what you bring and what gaps you need to fill. And maybe it's an academic gap, maybe it's a soft skills gap, maybe it's something industry-wide you want to learn, maybe it's just gaining more experience. But having an awareness and understanding of who you are, and then having an awareness of how an MBA is going to help contribute to where you want to go. Stephanie talked about goals. That's important. Understanding why do you need an MBA to get there? How is that going to help you? And then why is the Tuck MBA the right place for you? So do you know us? Have you been aware enough to understand what we're really about? Because each school you can get a great education at any of the top tier schools, but each school has a really different experience. And do you understand what your experience will be like at Tuck? And that's the awareness piece. Did I miss anything?
I think that was really thorough, though I would still encourage you to sort of reinforce those messages Kristin provided by going to the website and reading to it and referring to it again.
Going off your last point there, Kristin, someone who's looking at multiple different business schools, curious, what is it that differentiates Tuck from the rest of the top tier business schools?
Absolutely, and that's something you should be asking every school you are looking at and going to, and talk to multiple people. I think you'll hear hopefully consistent stories from the schools that you talk to in terms of who you talk to. But I think at Tuck the clear things are, one, it's an incredibly unique location, but it's not location because it's a pretty place and that's what's important about that location. It's because what the location gives to the learning experience and the community here and why it becomes so important. We are in a unique, beautiful location in Hanover, New Hampshire. We have a very immersive experience. Our students don't scatter at the end of the day. They stay together, living and learning together, and build deep-seated, deep-rooted relationships with each other based on trust. You'll work in a study group that you will learn to work together, even though you're not picking each other as teammates. So you're developing your empathy and ability to understand others' perspectives, even when it's not a team you choose. But one of the things you do is you will work with that team closely. You will immerse yourself in that experience and you'll develop these deep relationships. And because you do that in this very unique location where people stay together and learn together and live together, and also because it's a very personal scale to our school. We talk about it being a personal, connected, and transformative experience. It is personal, it is connected, and because of that, it helps in the transformation process. And one of the things that you will also find is that because you have these deep relationships, these personal relationships, you will have an opportunity to take chances, to step outside your comfort zone, to fail, to pick yourself back up, and also know that the people around you are going to help you do that as well. They're going to help you pick yourself back up. They're going to help you learn from the experience. They're going to challenge you, but again, in that respectful, thoughtful way. It is important. One of the things I also like to highlight is that doesn't mean that everybody at Tuck is best friends. You are going to have friends and you're going to have the ability to work with everybody as colleagues. And that, I think, is the important thing, that it is a place of deep learning and deep relationships where you learn to work together collegially, respectfully, and also really incredibly smart people that you'll get to know. And all of that comes from this deep, immersive experience from our location and the personal scale.
Can I just add 2 quick points? And I have the feeling we could spend the entire hour on this, so I'm going to really try to make them quick. But other things that always stand out to me and that I've also heard from students and alums, the intention. So everyone comes here very intentionally. You do not end up in Hanover, New Hampshire by accident or out of convenience. Everyone makes a very thoughtful, intentional choice to be here, and as such, and as they are encouraged by us through the admissions process, they bring their entire selves. And they are contributing and they want to engage. They come here because they want that personal, connected, transformative experience. They don't want transactional. they want to get involved and contribute. So the intention really always sticks out to me. And then the other thing too is the part of personal, to me, is the ability to personalize the experience. And I think sometimes it seems counterintuitive because of our required core. But I think that's completely, lots of opportunity to customize. So whether it's the entire second year being elective based, whether it's a ton of opportunity for independent study, whether it's, opportunities outside of the classroom, but really whatever you are interested in, there's likely to be support. Well, there's definitely support and likely to be resources as well. So, pursuing FYPs, first year projects that have never been done before, proposing global insight expeditions that have never occurred before, starting new clubs. So that agility that you have, and I think that does, again, come as a result of the personal scale, the supportive community, and that immersive experience.
Absolutely.
Switching gears a little bit, some folks are curious about the logistics around the interview process. Things like how many slots are available, what times of the year are best to come, how close to deadlines can people do interviews. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Do you want me to take that?
Kristin leads our interview process on the admissions team, so I'm going to let her
I will
tackle
take that
this.
one. Yay. So let's talk, if you're planning your round 2 or round 3 application, I'll talk specifically about deadlines for those, but also how our interviews work. So the first thing I'm going to say is our interviews are done blind. In other words, your interviewer will have nothing but your resume. So that means you can interview before you've submitted your application or after you've submitted your application. To the interviewer, they don't know. So with the applicant-initiated interviews, if you're coming to interview on campus, we have deadlines for each applicant-initiated interview for each round. Those are different than the application deadlines. So read our website carefully and the deadlines carefully to understand the difference between the two. If you are applying this year for round 2, and our round 2 application deadline is January 7th, or round 3, which the application deadline is April 1st. If you are applying for those 2 rounds, you need to, I wrote down the times, you need to do your round 2 application, your applicant-initiated interview by February 1st. And if you are doing round 3, you need to do your round 3 applicant-initiated interview by April 5th. So what we do is you can go online to our website and you can see the interview slots that are available now. Go to the plan a visit, and you'll see how to schedule your interview. Please know that right now we are in the process of posting interviews, and our admissions coordinator, Greer, has put a note on there saying more interview slots are coming. We post them as they're available because they're done by second-year students, and right now we are waiting for our second-year students to get back to us with what their class schedules are for the winter, because we don't want to schedule an interview in the middle of their class. So anyway, because our second-year students are doing the interviews, we have about 43 trained students doing that. And so we are waiting right now to post more interview slots. There will be more coming. Greer puts that on the website. If you are not reading the landing page for the interviews and wondering when is this going to happen, go to the interview scheduling page and you'll see that on the landing page. So that's how basically how interviews work. They are, what I would say is, you can go all the way up to the interview date or the application date. I'm sorry, the applicant-initiated interview date. There's so many.
There's a lot of
there's a lot of things I'm talking about here. Sorry about that. But anyway, the applicant-initiated interview date, so that February 1st or April 5th date, you can interview anytime before then. If you plan your interview for after those dates and you applied in round 2, February 1st. If you plan it for after that date, you will get an email from us saying, I'm sorry, we can't do an applicant-initiated interview after that. And then we'll ask you either to reschedule or to cancel, or to consider, if you're in round 2, pushing your application to round 3. It's whatever choice you decide to make. If you decide that you want to try and schedule earlier, just keep checking. If slots are filled, we are posting new slots regularly all the time. The other option is, of course, to submit your application without doing the interview and then waiting to see if you are invited to interview. Now, obviously, that may not be your first choice. It is an option. The nice thing about doing the applicant-initiated interview is it takes one opportunity away from the admissions committee to say no to your application. And so it's an opportunity for you to put your best foot forward in the interview and hopefully knock it out of the park and just put another positive thing in your application file.
So kind of going off of that, with the interview, how much info from the application does the interviewer get to see? And is it different between if you're being interviewed by a committee member like yourselves or a second-year student?
Great question. All they're going to see is your resume. Our students never read anything from your file beyond that. So all they will see is your resume. While committee members do interviews sometimes when our students aren't available or when we're in the process of training our interviewers, we most likely have not read your application either. We read over 2,600 applications in a year, and even if we did read your application, we might not remember that we read you because it could have been 3 months before, or 2, we haven't read it yet and we will later. So we are really working off your resume, which is why it's important to give us a good updated resume. But the interviewer is not seeing anything else in your application. Once we get to admissions committee, we're putting your entire application together, including the interview evaluation, and then considering your application holistically from there.
So next, if people can't visit Tuck for the interview, and I do want to let you know we're having some folks tell us they can't hear me say the question, so if you could just repeat
Sure.
what the topic is. But if people can't visit Tuck for the interview, what are some different ways that they can explore and display their fit for the school and its culture?
Yeah, sure. So Eric relayed the question about if you're not able to visit for the interview, how can you relay your fit? How can you demonstrate your fit for the school and the culture? Say a couple things. One, a visit itself doesn't necessarily show interest or fit or any of that. Hopefully it furthers the strength of your application, I guess. Hopefully it will inevitably, by having these interactions with Tuckies, with the Tuck community, it will automatically make your application stronger and you will be able to better convey that. But sort of checking that box that you visited is not, should not be the end goal. Similarly, other ways to better understand Tuck's culture and the program. Kristin talked earlier about in-person events around the world. Those are great opportunities to get to know us a little bit better. They're not evaluative, so don't feel like you are on the spot at all. No one is taking notes. No one is reporting back to our team. Again, yes, we can find out how many, coffee chats you've attended, but that's not important to us. It's what you bring away from those interactions that actually, will make your candidacy richer. Other opportunities include, Kristin also referenced the blog. That gives you a great opportunity to get to know the program a little bit more. Our ambassadors are great. There's a program called Tuck Connections. Our ambassador webpage is also available on Tuck's website, which will allow you to contact an ambassador, a regional captain. So then they will utilize their ambassador team to put you in touch with the student who might best match your interest. So those are great ways to get to know us. As far as demonstrating your interest and your fit, there are a couple different ways to do that through the application, the written application, because I know we're kind of thinking about if you're not able to initiate that interview. We do ask about it in the first essay, as well as there's a short answer there too. So that anything to add?
I had a couple thoughts, and one of which is one of the things you'll find when you connect with Tuckies is they love to talk about Tuck. Use judgment in terms of when you're connecting with them, have some thoughtful questions to ask. Be thoughtful about their time and also about understanding that some people may have some information, some people may have other information. For example, if you want to connect with some of our students, and you go to, you're interested in healthcare and you go to the healthcare club and you email the leaders of the healthcare club, all of them. It's probably not the most judicious way of using their time, but connecting with one person, asking them some questions, and then using that to further your information is really important. As I said, Tuckies love to talk about Tuck. They're also really happy to help, but they're also really busy in terms of helping a lot of different people. A lot of our students get a lot of questions. And so really be thoughtful and judicious and plan ahead so you are really being effective with both your time and their time. You'll find that Tuckies are generous. And it's just really great if you can show that, that spirit of cooperation with them in terms of being thoughtful with their time.
Mm-hmm.
So someone is curious about the letters of recommendation required from Tuck and how ours differ from other peer schools and sort of what the background is behind our questions being different from other schools that they may be applying to.
Sure. Yes, so Tuck has questions that are specific to Tuck and hit on all four of our criteria, and that's exactly why they are different from other programs. So we do recognize that there is now a common letter of recommendation rubric that is used by a handful of our peer schools. We have chosen for the time being to stick with our own Tuck-specific questions so that we can hear specifically about your qualities of smart, nice, accomplished, and aware. I will say, though, we do not want that to be a barrier for anyone. So if your recommender expresses that they simply don't have the time to do both, that's okay if you want to submit or if they submit something different. So again, we'd love for them to touch on those 4 criteria, but if they need to submit responses based on the common letter of recommendation or just more of a free form letter, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
So a question about test scores. People are curious if the official test score reports, the ones sent from the testing institutions, are required as part of the application or only after you are admitted. And again, repeat the question just in case folks can't hear me.
Yes.
Sure. So the question is about official test scores. When do you need to send them in? So when you're applying, all you need to do is submit your self-reported scores and make the official scores available to us if you are admitted to Tuck. We'll need them then. We do ask, though, that you submit self-report all valid scores that you have. We will look at your highest score, but we would love to see if you've tried it more than once. Have you progressed? Sometimes you score higher in the verbal in one test taking and higher in the quant in another test taking. While we can't super score those, we do like to see that, yeah, you really can do it. It just, sometimes that test does not allow you to put it all together. So definitely self-report all of those, and if you're admitted, we will need the official scores. Don't let waiting for the official scores hold up your application. Go ahead and self-report.
And the same goes for the transcript as well. We don't need an official transcript until you've been admitted.
So kind of switching gears a little bit, how are reapplicants evaluated, folks who have applied to Tech before in the past?
A question about the evaluation of reapplicants. We look favorably upon reapplicants, particularly those who have taken measures to improve their candidacy. We do offer feedback if requested, and so perhaps you've taken advantage of that. If you have, and that comes before the active admission cycle, so if you haven't, it's a little bit too late for this year, but if you did receive any feedback, certainly address that within your application. Otherwise, I think most people are able to take, with some time and space after, working so hard on the application, you are able to step back and see some areas of improvement. So encourage you to think about ways that you can strengthen your candidacy along those lines. We also ask that you complete a reapplicant essay. That actually sort of chronicles exactly that, what you've done, since the previous cycle, and what you've, how you've grown, and what you've accomplished. So those are the big things that stand out. I will also say that we do, when we're evaluating, we do see both applications. we are not reading your previous application as thoroughly as we read it, the first time, nor as thoroughly as we're reading your current application, but we are able to reference it and see, again, that growth. I will also say don't assume that we have all the information necessary because we are looking at your prior application. Do still put just as much time and effort into the second or third attempt, when it helps the reader have a more comprehensive picture, and it showcases that you are, genuinely making a strong effort.
And I'll add, I just had the fortune of talking to a reapplicant who was admitted and is now a first-year student today. He stopped by my office to say hi, and I guess what I'm trying to emphasize here is every year we are admitting people who tried in a previous year and were able to enhance their applications and come in, and they're some of our favorite people at Tuck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, the nature of this process is that we have many more qualified applicants than we're able to make offers to, and so it doesn't necessarily reflect a deficiency of any sort, and so do come back with confidence. We enjoy seeing reapplicants.
So we're running low on time, so I think we'll end with this last question, which is, if you could give one piece of advice to applicants, what would it be?
Okay, so the question is, what piece of advice would we give to applicants if we give one? I'll give mine. You can give yours.
Yeah.
I guess what I'd say is, I know this can be a stressful process. We would like to take as much stress out of it as possible, but at the same time, things that are worth doing sometimes require that stress to get us moving. What I would say though is relax a little bit. You will end up in the place that will be good for you. You will find the fit that's right for you. There is not just one perfect school for you. There are some great schools out there. Tuck is absolutely a wonderful place to be. We hope all of you will delve deeply into the Tuck experience, will apply to Tuck, and will have an opportunity to get to know you better, but also realize for a lot of different reasons there may be times where this is not the right place to be at this time in your life, and that it's a really competitive process, but you will land in a good place. And that would be my one piece of advice.
Yeah. I'm going to sort of just echo something that Kristin said earlier in the conversation, and that is to bring your true and whole self to the process. We really do. Our team really enjoys getting to know these applicants. Like, I think we really, it's not just a job, it's something we enjoy doing. And I've been so inspired by many of your applications and just interested because I've learned so much about different industries and cultures. So show us that, like, showcase who you are and what you'll be able to contribute and how you'll add to the really rich fabric of Tuck. But since that's it, I'll say good night to some and likely good morning and afternoon to others. But thank you so much for joining us, and really looking forward to getting to know you January 5th or early April?
April 1st.
April 1st.
April 1st, yes.
Yeah, so good luck. Please, you're welcome to stay in touch with Tuck in different ways, and I hope you do.
Yes, good luck. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are and whenever you are in the world. Good night.
Bye.